At Four Rivers Smokehouse, now through October 31st, take $5 off on orders of $25 or more when ordering in-store, online, or by phone using promo code Gators Breakdown.
Gators Breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters, and you can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. Joining me for this episode, kind of impromptu here, Graham Hall from the Gainesville Sun. And Graham, man, I've said it plenty of times. It's the moniker for the podcast. There's never a dull moment in Gator Nation, and never more so fitting than now.
Yeah, that's really true. And before we really get into it, I got to say that it is a sad day, regardless of how you look at it, because I think we're all on board that nobody wants to see a virus spread or anyone get sick whatsoever. And talking about these in just plain terms, you know, we just talked to Scott Strickland on the Zoom call, and he did call it a sad day. And I think that it just gets missed sometimes in the media when you're reporting these things, that sometimes people are, I don't know, rooting for them. But more than anything, I just got to say that it's just an extremely sad day to report these things, because things were going so well for so long, in a sense, Dave.
Yeah, man. And there was the big question. If you had asked me in April, in May, in June, even into maybe even early July before the team got together, were we going to have a football season, I was leaning no. And 3 games in, we finally see the Gators play 3 games, go 2-1 in those games, and now going into the 4th game of the season against the defending national champion LSU Tigers, the game's put on hold. So yeah, like you said, I personally didn't think a season would happen at one point. We get our games, we get teased a little bit, and now here we are, where we're at the team is fighting this COVID virus. And as you said, you hope all the precautions are done right. And as Scott Strickland said, that these guys are taking their precautions and they're healthy. And that's the number one thing, is everybody's taking care of themselves and doing it the right way. But as you said, man, it was just we didn't know we'd get it. We got a taste of it, and now for a little bit, at least now, it's gone for a little while.
Yeah, it is gone for a little while. Scott Strickland today said that the program is going to indefinitely close the facilities and send those guys home, although everyone who's not in quarantine and the coaches who aren't will stick to the current protocols. I still do have a few questions about that, but that's not really what we're talking about right now. Really, the last few days, though, I think that Florida is going to need to do a lot of inward reflection, I guess would be the term, I guess contact tracing, whatever you want to call it, to make sure that, like you said, Florida can get back on track in a sense. Just to recap some of what has happened here in the past few days. Sunday morning, Florida, after the game, Florida had several players in their morning round of testing who were experiencing symptoms come into the program and later tested positive. And Florida, while they were waiting to see how widespread the problem is, did kind of go about business as usual. They did postpone a Monday meeting and later restarted, and the team did practice on Monday, and we'll have to see if that does lead to more problems down the line. Right now, fortunately, Scott Strickland did say that everyone is either asymptomatic or has had mild symptoms, and I'm not sure what mild necessarily means. If you go by the CDC guidelines, they're experiencing cold and flu-like symptoms. So I don't know where the team goes from here, Dave. I think that you're going to see a 1-week postponement, if anything. But I'm looking past LSU. I'm looking at possibly Missouri and seeing when Florida can get back on track, because we've seen that if you don't knock this thing out, if you don't really clean everything and take serious time, if you come back too quickly is what I'm saying, it can knock you out longer. It can linger around the program, and that's not what Florida wants to do. And what Scott Strickland said today, that they have to know when to pump the brakes with his terms. Florida is wise to pump the brakes right now in the situation with less than 50 scholarship players really available, including quarantine. And that's nothing to joke about.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Graham's gonna join me. We got off the Scott Strickland call. We had Dan Mullen on the SEC teleconference this morning there. So a lot of moving parts the last couple of days, Graham. But before we do, remember you can find Gators Breakdown at news4jax.com/Gators Breakdown. You'll find all the Gators Breakdown episodes there. News for Jack's coverage of the Gators. There'll be plenty more on all this coverage of the Gators having to postpone their game this weekend versus LSU. Please share, rate, and review Gators Breakdown. Review the show. Subscribe on YouTube. Hit that like button if you're checking us out on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. Whatever audio version you want out there, you can get it on the whatever your favorite podcast platform is if you haven't already. And then check us out on social media. We're on Twitter and Facebook at Gators Breakdown. So, Graham, we kind of found out today what happened over the weekend a little bit. Tuesday, it did come out that in the campus, the Alligator had the report of 19 Florida Gator players tested positive for COVID. And then Wednesday comes along and we get even more about that. Alan Taylor of The Athletic, a source told The Athletic there that the Gators have 29 players sidelined, 19 who tested positive, another 10 who faced mandatory quarantines based upon being exposed. That had come out right before Dan Mullen's SEC teleconference that he jumped on. And then he started that with, of course, he wanted to clarify the stadium capacity comments and, basically saying they played Texas A&M in a great atmosphere. He kind of just wanted, an atmosphere for Florida when you kind of relate it to that. He says whatever number the health officials allow, that's what he wants that environment to consist of with that safe number. He apologized if he offended anyone and how it has respect for the health officials and praises the protocols that Florida has taken the approach with. And of course, later on we get the announcement that the game's postponed. But of course, Graham, when it came out Tuesday that Florida had been hit by COVID, and you go back to Dan Mullen's comments, there was a whole lot of connection that didn't need to be connected. Those are two separate incidents, and nothing to connect there. But a lot of people wanted to connect those dots.
Yeah, I'm not going to criticize Dan Mullen too much in a sense because this is so hard of a situation to deal with. But knowing what we do know now and knowing that the team may have, I guess, regrets in retrospect about practicing, I could understand why there could be some blame put on Dan Mullen and maybe Scott Strickland's shoulders because you're supposed to take, what is that term, an abundance of caution and stop everything. And the team did practice after at least being aware of 5 positive tests and the doctors thinking that this may be more of a widespread problem. They still did go ahead and practice with those who were available, and people can judge that decision however they want. But that was the information they had available. I think that first I got to say credit to Peyton Titus at the Alligator for putting that 19 number out there because, and here's why I say that, even though it has grown to 21 with 18 and plus the 3 walk-ons, Scott Strickland said that number was accurate at the time and it gave a more reflective view of the real situation because, and let me say this and explain this to people who don't know, the testing numbers that were released earlier that Tuesday, right, the 5 number, were accurate as of Monday. And I don't know when Monday. So they were from Sunday's tests, if you believe the schedule the SEC laid out. Now we find out that Florida was testing daily, so they could have been from Monday. And in that case, everything Scott Strickland said, they practiced with 5 guys who tested positive with those guys out. Now you find that 2 coaches are among that group. And like you said with Alan's report at The Athletic, a very good story. I recommend everyone reading if they can. 29 and counting right now. The big reason I didn't put out a number in any time and only said, I think the big thing, which I'm going to get to in one second, is that this is a changing situation all the time. The numbers are going to change. People are going to get off the list. They're going to become eligible and people are going to be added to it. And in college athletics, we're not going to really know that much, it seems, because these schools are going to protect them more than NFL teams are going to protect them when it comes to keeping that information. And I'm not going to get into whether you think that's right or wrong, but that's just the reality of the situation. The last thing I want to say necessarily on that point is when it comes down to having a player on the road who I'm hesitant to even say this. I put out there that one of the initial 5 players that tested positive was someone who, in my knowledge, played significant minutes because I know who they are, and I'm not divulging that, but I know that one of them played significant reps in College Station. And for them to test positive Sunday, if that were the case, it does sometimes become a moral issue with reporting that as soon as possible so that Texas A&M and Florida and other programs possibly can make the best decisions. Because as Scott Strickland laid out, a lot of programs have financial sheets that are an absolute mess right now, and pumping the brakes early and mitigating the risks and minimizing the damage rather than trying to carry on as usual, it may be the smartest decision, just in my amateur opinion, in a sense. And that's why I think there's been kind of a push to make this case by the Alligator and people like myself and you, Dave, to get the full information out there. And kudos to Dan Mullen and Scott Strickland for being transparent today.
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest probably transparent remark and kind of going to your point, Strickland said some players started showing symptoms, which was runny nose or, seasonal allergy symptoms late last week. And then they traveled to College Station. And he said he wished they would have said something sooner, and you kind of Friday being that date of when the team traveled, and some of those players traveled as well. The team was tested on Thursday. And, that kind of has to be the case. Would you like to be able to test on Friday before you get on the plane? Absolutely. But I'm not sure the timing aspect of all that and how that works. So Florida tested Thursday, and everybody who was able to traveled on Friday without testing positive for COVID. But as I said, if you started showing the symptoms, you wish they would have said something earlier and then maybe held back as a precaution if that was the case. But as far as testing goes, Florida did the testing through the protocols of the SEC and did it the right way, the way they were supposed to.
Yeah, and the protocols are very interesting. Someone asked Scott Strickland on the call if he could change, I think it was Mark Long, if he could change anything about the SEC protocols. And, Scott was very diplomatic, let me say that. And I think a wise decision. So let me be a little bit less diplomatic and give you my opinion on that. The lack in that privacy, let me backtrack a little bit, the privacy that I talked about with universities keeping things under wraps and protecting those student athletes is, I guess, going to backfire in a sense, possibly, when you look at the protocols don't necessarily strictly require these teams to, I guess, self-report so many figures, like who possibly may have been exposed. It's just who is tested positive and who is, in Florida's case, actually unavailable. You don't know actual numbers of who is tested positive. So when you do go and play a road game, you may not be aware of certain factors. You have less information. And what Scott Strickland said today, we haven't been able to necessarily trace the source of where this came from, yet we believe it came from on the road. Those statements don't necessarily mix together well, if you ask me, because if there was more transparency, they would be able to contact trace and find the source a little bit more easily. And theoretically here, just based on what I've read and on the ever-changing situation that is COVID-19, the more contact tracing you can do, the more you can limit the future spread and avoid epidemics. So in a sense, the SEC protocols are limiting the ability of, after you have an epidemic, to contain it and stop it from getting worse based on protecting student athletes. And we can sit here all day and debate about the ethical and other concerns of that. But I think that if you step back and look at it from a medical standpoint, this culture, in a sense, is limiting the ability of contact tracing if you do have an epidemic.
Yeah, the big thing, and you brought up there, is the suspicion the trip to College Station is the cause. And, you kind of have to look at that in the way as he's not, it wasn't a blame at Texas A&M or a blame at the city of College Station. It was, hey, it happened during the trip.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of people kind of took that the wrong way. It was like, no, he's not blaming Texas A&M, not blaming College Station. The suspicion is the trip itself, not necessarily the destination that caused it. So I think a lot of people got held up on that and thought maybe he was throwing shade toward the Aggies or College Station. That's not how I took it, and that's not how he meant it.
No, not at all. Brian Kelly, earlier in the season, Notre Dame had 25 guys get sick from a pregame meal, and he was as transparent as he could be about it, that it just could be a team-wide activity on the road that you're not normally doing, going somewhere that you're not normally used to going, interacting or bumping into people that are, not used to following the protocols that you're following. It can be anything where they break out of their little bubble. He's not necessarily pinning that on the Aggies, and I don't think anyone would buy that, considering the Aggies have in the 24 hours, 48 hours since, have not reported any issues. So that would not really hold weight if anyone was thinking that was his insinuation.
Right. So kind of to recap why the game was postponed. Florida LSU postponed. We're looking at December 12th. There are 18 scholarship players, 3 walk-ons tested positive through contact tracing, quarantine, and injured players. The Gators have less than 50 players available. That's why the game was postponed. And, you can honestly, with less than 50, Graham, you can forget about if there was a certain number of offensive linemen, or a certain number of defensive linemen or quarterbacks that didn't have the number for. With less than 50 players available, yeah, of course there's going to be position groups that have been hit. But with that less than 53, actually this is less than 50, but under 53 threshold, that's what the SEC is going to look at. When it dipped below the number 53, you have to make the move to cancel the game.
Yeah, absolutely, and there's a few more intricacies in that 53-man rule as well. I've touted sometimes the additions of smart walk-ons like Mark Pitts and stuff like that. So you think, oh man, why can't one of those guys play? They're competitive. They'd be playing at places like UCF and stuff like that. The SEC requires that you have, I believe, 1 quarterback, 4 defensive linemen, and 7 offensive linemen available. And that's just some of those position groups. And it varies among the list with those numbers. And I can tell you right away, Florida is coming up short in several of those areas when you factor in quarantine, contact tracing, and positive. So it's not even just they're below the 53-man. They're missing multiple benchmarks that, once those tests were confirmed today, really kind of put in plain view. And I'll credit Florida again here, even though I don't necessarily have to. Once they realized today, and I was kind of standing by waiting for this to be fully final and push that great tweet button, make all my money off twitter.com. Once Florida realized, to their credit today, they spread the word. They told parents in a Zoom call on Tuesday night what the case was, that this is a likely thing that was going to happen. They even spoke to some parents of players who tested positive. And I don't want to describe Dan Mullen's tone necessarily as apologetic, but what I heard was that he was emotional in that call. And I think that when you boil it down, like I said at the beginning of this is a sad day. And while everyone wants to win and those guys' jobs is to win, Florida realized pretty quickly that this was not something that was going to be able to happen, and they started taking the steps. As everyone remembers very well, when there was a hurricane coming in here, people were hesitant to close the game. I mean, we're 3 days away from kickoff against Saturday, and they're fully prepared to postpone the game. So it was not going to happen, and it was just finalizing that. And now I think the step turns to obviously the health of Florida's athletes and when they can get back in the facility.
Yeah, we'll get into kind of what's happening next there, Graham. I know there's not going to be not much football in Gainesville this weekend, of course, but you can still enjoy a great time watching other teams around the country play some football. And when it's football season, it's also tailgating season, Graham. And barbecue goes good with that. Hey guys, there's nothing better for a tailgate than barbecue, and you got to get it from Four Rivers Smokehouse, named the #1 barbecue in the South by Southern Living Magazine. Four Rivers Smokehouse is a family-owned barbecue restaurant specializing in 18-hour smoked Angus brisket. Graham, man, I love me some brisket, and got to have some ribs too, man.
Absolutely. I've got the Four Rivers barbecue sauce sitting here in my fridge right now. I put it on everything. I'm a big barbecue sauce guy, man. When I get it from the store or from any restaurant, I bring it home, I'm putting extra sauce on every single time. I'm dousing it. I know a lot of people out there are saying that I'm ruining high quality meat, and they're probably accusing me of being the guy that puts ketchup on steak or something ludicrous like that. But no, man, I just love me some barbecue sauce, especially from Four Rivers.
Absolutely, man. You got to get their home style size, fresh baked desserts at any of Four Rivers Smokehouse's 13 Florida locations. Four Rivers party packages come tailgate ready, so you can spend more time watching the game, not the grill. Enjoy the Party of 6 package for $55 or the Party of 12 package for $99. Each package includes Four Rivers award-winning barbecue meats, home-style sides, buns, and Graham's favorite signature barbecue sauces. So now through October 31st, take $5 off on $25 or more when ordering in-store, online, or by phone using promo code Gators Breakdown. Gators, if you're in Gainesville, swing by Four Rivers located in Butler Plaza. If you're tailgating at home in the Orlando, Jacksonville, Tampa, or Tallahassee areas, then you can also enjoy the best barbecue anywhere in Florida at Four Rivers Smokehouse. So the barbecue should make everybody feel a little bit better for missing a game this Saturday, Graham.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. It's been a minute since I've had some Four Rivers barbecue. I may have to swing back by there this weekend because we're not going to have too much else going on. Man, when I really look at this slate of games, though, that's coming up, and we're only, 10 days away from the Big Ten actually starting football. We could have full Power 5 football going on in November if everyone just gets their stuff together.
Yeah, and talk about getting their stuff together. That's what Florida in the SEC, LSU, all these teams have to do. You're expecting a game this week. As we mentioned earlier, the tentative plan for Florida LSU is to be played December 12th. So now, Graham, that means Florida's going to end their season with Kentucky, Tennessee, and LSU in 3 straight games. And if you're still in the running for the SEC championship, that's going to be a tough 3-game stretch there going into Atlanta if everything plays out the way fans want them to. So as we kind of look at it moving forward here, we still don't even know. Right now, Florida is pausing all team activities related to the football team. Nobody's doing anything related to football right now at the University of Florida. So, Graham, it also begs the question, what happens to Florida, Missouri next week with all the quarantining and going on that has to take place now? So it's the schedule's kind of already being flipped on its head a little bit with these Gators.
Yeah, and it kind of makes it so that when Florida does return to football activities, they really won't have a bye week necessarily, because you think about it, they have been in the building for half the week, and now the next few days are not going to be spent on preparing or really relaxing. It'll be spent on staying up on film, possibly of Missouri, up on film, then even of Georgia. That's going to be on November 7th. There's a bye week on October that is built in for October 31st, but you have to think that if the Missouri game gets pushed, you're looking at possibly that being pushed to a week after that. When Florida can just get back in the building remains just totally in flux. Like you said, Scott Strickland kept using that term indefinitely. I put out there that they were optimistic that they could get back by next Monday. That's optimistic. If you really had to, I don't know, make me put some money on it, which is not much that I have. I'm saying $5 that maybe Dan Mullen is back in the building by Monday. But I don't think you'll see anywhere near a full return to football activities for a week in Gainesville. I think that's wise. You look at the weight room, you look at everywhere. They're going to take that, I hate to use this term again, that abundance of caution before bringing everyone back, because if you restart it, you can't stop it again and then restart it again. In my mind, I think that you only get one shot at sending a lesson that, guys, we showed we could do it before. Something happened. Let's fix it. Let's make sure it doesn't happen again. And you do that, and if you can return, and I think teams can really benefit from doing that. If they can see everything, see how fickle it really is if they don't follow it, and then unify around that, I think they could really benefit a team. But if you don't do that, it could lead to a whole lot of discord. It already is kind of a tenuous situation to avoid blaming people who come down with the virus and see that you have to stop improving because someone else got sick nearby you. That is already a budding mentality among college football players. And you have to make sure that only happens once, in my mind, to avoid it becoming a serious issue inside a program.
Yeah, it happens again, and people are really going to start questioning, even if you are taking all the precautions, is it just inevitable that it's going to happen? And no matter what you do, that it's going to. And look, yeah, most people thought coming into this season, it was going to be hard to get all 10 games in. And that's why the SEC built that, December 12th date in. And, that's going to right now turn out to work out. And, we're kind of looking at the schedule here. Missouri already has, if they don't play Florida on October 24th. Then they already have a game against Kentucky on October 31st. So what's going to happen is, if Florida and LSU and Florida and Missouri doesn't happen, then to me the chain reaction is going to be the SEC has to change the entire schedule. If you don't want to cancel games, if you still want teams to try and play 10 games, then you're going to have to look at a solution of shifting schedules and shifting other teams' bye weeks around just to fit all 10 games in. So I do wonder what the SEC is thinking behind the scenes. If 2 games for a team get postponed, then what's the protocol? What's the movement there? Do you start canceling games and then going by a winning percentage or something like that? It's going to be. And we're still a little whiles away before we'll even find out what happens with Florida and Missouri. But you got to think, through quarantining and guys having to miss some time, that it's a distinct possibility that you have to look out for that game being moved as well.
It certainly is possible. And we're sitting here with Missouri Vanderbilt already being pushed, right, and now the Florida LSU game being pushed. And,
Ole Miss came out today too, saying they've tested positive.
They're fighting. And so this is where the politics are absolutely going to come into play. If every SEC team has an issue and every SEC team is not going to play 10 games, then absolutely the conference is going to have to figure something else out, or they're going to have to make it about 9 games or whoever has the most wins. Because, and I hate to kind of beat a drum here, but this is kind of what people were saying was a possibility in the offseason, when we sat here and said, for the first time ever, teams that manage the virus and follow the social distancing protocols may have, for the first time ever, a competitive advantage. And people were like, well, what does that mean in a sense? I mean, everyone's going to have to deal with the virus. Well, we may be here in December, and Georgia has 7 games, and Florida has only been able to play, 8 games, period. Who knows if that's the case? One of those teams who just got to play 1 extra game and therefore has 1 more win is going to be the representative. And for the first time ever, it may come down to, theoretically here, not going out and celebrating after a win, or not, breaking any social distancing rules out there, wearing a mask, whatever. That may absolutely have a competitive advantage for a team right now. And I hate to rub anyone's face in it, but Florida may be in peril of facing that. If they do miss the LSU game and they do miss the Missouri game, and like I just said, if they do possibly have to shut down or postpone another game, the odds of them winning the SEC East, if Georgia does not face similar circumstances and similar postponements, are going to absolutely take a hit, more so than they already have in a loss percent, because then you have less ground to make up. And I hate to be that person who's sitting here on some pedestal being like, haha, I told you so, in a sense, but this is one of those reasons about why people were saying everything about the precautions and how careful people had to be, or they could absolutely have a competitive disadvantage.
Yeah, I mean, even if Florida can play Missouri next week, we don't know what players would be available. Because granted, it looks like, all these tests have come around the same time, so you would think all the guys would come back around the same time. But if guys aren't able to practice the next couple of weeks, how's their conditioning? Will they be ready to play? And can they come back? Or are some guys going to still be out by the time the Missouri game rolls around? So yeah, this isn't just. Go ahead, Graham.
Yeah, think about it real quick. I just want to break down, the math in a sense. You brought up the days, and I don't want to be a Debbie Downer again, but let's just do the math in a sense. It is Wednesday, so if you started quarantining players, we know that they did some team activities Monday. So the first day that could possibly count theoretically would be Thursday. And the SEC rules say that if you test positive for the virus, it's a 10-day quarantine before you can return. So we're talking 10 days at a minimum for 21 players. But then if you were just around someone who is tested even negative and waiting a result, you have to do a 14-day quarantine. So you're talking about 10 more players that may have to be out 2 weeks from today. So best case scenario, if you get everyone back from who had the virus, 21 players and the assistant coaches, the best case scenario that you could get them back would be next Friday, the day before the Missouri game. And I'll just let that speak for itself.
Yeah, a lot to wonder about, a lot to still kind of sift through.
I'm sorry, I hate to be that negative, but yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what happened, once people found out the whole 19 number came out and said, it really did kind of come about that, okay, Florida's not playing a game. You kind of knew right away when that 19 number come out, it was going to be very difficult for Florida to play a game. And that number, kind of was, rectified, or not rectified, but reaffirmed the next day. And that's why we are where we are right now. So, Grant, man, any last thoughts with kind of how this may play out, or kind of what's going to happen as we look at Florida going forward? And it's everybody said something like this was inevitable. And of course, I'll go back to the point. That's why the SEC built in the bye week, and of course it is. And I think the whole point that Scott Strickland was going back to is some of the guys that if they had symptoms, they wish they would have said something, because now you're in closer quarters than you are most of the time when you're traveling, and that's probably how it spread while Florida was getting ready to travel and traveling to College Station, being around each other in locker rooms and buses and airplanes and going out there in Texas. That probably seemed, if we can put it together and can assume a little bit, that's probably where everything kind of just blew up a little bit regarding this and all the events afterwards. So, man, it's just, I'll kind of go back to the beginning too. we had football, we got a taste, and now we're just kind of on standby till all this gets figured out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that two final thoughts real quick. One is going to be personal, but before that, let me just remind everyone that before the Lakers just won the championship, which already feels like a few weeks ago, just in this COVID-19 2020 world, I go back to June when they first started the bubble. There were bubble breaches, and the Lou Williams thing, and the bubble got breached, and multiple things happened. They rebounded from it and still had a season. So there is still room to be optimistic that Florida can restart, get back to it, and show that once again, you follow these procedures that we have in place, and you talk about doubling down. Scott Strickland doubled down on his assertion that he thinks Florida has a good model in place. And for 11 weeks, he thought that they had a good model, and they just lived with the reality that you're going to have a spatter of cases, whatever you want to call it. And it's all about just avoiding it becoming a spreading epidemic.
And Grant, before you go further there, man, college kids are going to be college kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I hate to sit here on any high horse and say, well, you shouldn't go to Midtown because, I lived right across the street from Buckman Drive when I was at UF. I lived there in Fletcher Hall, and when I was 19, 20 years old, I worked at 101 Cantina, RIP. I'm not one to sit here and say you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that, because if I was to look at myself at that age, I absolutely would probably be taking those risks, because I understand how, I guess, low the sense is of possibly dying from the virus at that age, while understanding there are so many benefits, to socializing and going out and meeting people and not letting, like people have said, the virus dominate your life. But with that said, I'm not supporting anyone doing that and then going and seeing their parents or going in home. If you take those risks, you then should not be careless, is the only way I see it in my mind. I'm just going to leave it on a personal message. And, I feel like too often we're too critical of people like in Scott Strickland's position, or athletes who may not know that they have the virus. Well, how did you not know? Let me say this. I've lived in Gainesville my entire life. I get immunotherapy. For those who don't know that, I get allergy shots once a month. And, 24 hours ago, in the midst of this entire thing, I think I know what allergy symptoms look like. And I'm going to send you a picture later, Dave, if you don't believe me. But 24 hours ago, I broke out in the weirdest hives. And I'm one who thinks that I know everything about my allergies. And I was thinking about going to the hospital last night. It was that wild. And nothing, when I called my dad and asked him, he was like, probably something just blooming around here. And that is just the mentality of people around here. And if you lived here and all that, you definitely know that. Anyone trying to indict people who had the sniffles or a headache and were told it was just allergies. Because that is how life is. It hit me this week too. Exactly. It's, and it's not even just hay fever. It's ragweed. It's everything around this time of year. You're going to get the sniffles. You're going to get a headache. You're going to sneeze. And if we were quarantining everyone who did that, or you were shutting everything down, I am with people that is just not the right move. And I'm just saying personally, I totally understand what those people were going through when it was Friday, if they were sniffling and had a headache and they were thinking, oh, this is just allergies. I haven't done anything. I couldn't be COVID-19 positive. It was not reckless. That is just how life is. And I just hope people see that.
Yeah, agree. And like you said, kind of kudos to Scott Strickland there for the presser and taking the questions and answering them straight ahead and straightforward and like he can do. There was a reason he was named Athletic Director of the Year, and one of those today was one of those examples of the leadership I think Florida has under him. And look, UF Health's right there on campus too, and Florida will get this thing figured out. As you said, they'll figure out the best way to trace it and see. They have an inkling of how it happened and what was done to spread it. But I would say, Florida's in good hands moving forward. It may have just kind of hit at the wrong time where you may miss a game or two just because, like you said, we're finding out on a Wednesday. You may quarantine some guys on a Tuesday and Wednesday. But, I would say, Florida's going to do their best to get this thing figured out. And if it flares up again or whatever, then you just kind of know, hey, that's just the nature of the beast of this virus. And sometimes you can take all the precautions in the world, it's going to happen.
Yeah, if they can figure out, I'll say this, I know I said last thing, but if they can figure out, whoever figures it out, a bubble method that works for football where maybe it's Disney, but you're going to have to figure out a playing surface that isn't going to cost millions of dollars to fix after 15 games or so have happened on it. Whoever can figure out the way a bubble would work in college football is going to absolutely be that's $1 billion ticket in my mind. That's $1 billion ticket.
I think the SEC would just want to move all their teams to Atlanta and figure it out there in the Mercedes-Benz Dome.
Yeah, that'd be nice. That's a good place to play. Although Florida doesn't have a current good record there, I don't think so far, but that's a good place to play.
All right, Graham Hall, Gainesville Sun. Hey, man, thanks for hopping on here. I know we threw this thing together right quick to let Gators Breakdown listeners know everything going on, our thoughts about it, and what's to come for these Gators, man. Well, thank you once again.
Hey, my pleasure. Y'all stay safe, stay healthy out there. Hopefully we'll see some football within the next couple weeks back here in Gainesville.
All right, that's Graham Hall. I'm the host of Gators Breakdown, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. Guys and girls out there, thanks for listening to this episode of Gators Breakdown.